Welcome to the next edition of the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Voice of the Customer podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing discussion on IT innovation and how it's making an impact on people's lives. Our next Security, Innovation, and Transformation discussion explores how vacation specialty airline Allegiant Air solved their PCI problem and got a whole lot better security culture to boot. When Allegiant needed to quickly manage their compliance around the payment card industry data security standard, it embraced many technologies, including tokenization, but it also adopted an improved philosophy towards privacy methods in general. Here to share how security technology can lead to posture maturity and then ultimately to cultural transformation with many business benefits, we're joined by Chris Gullett. He's Director of Information Assurance at Allegiant Air in Las Vegas. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Dana. Looking forward to having this discussion.
Yeah, we're glad that you could join us. So let's start at sort of a high level. What are the major trends that are driving a need for better privacy and security, particularly when it comes to customer information, not just for your airline, but for the airline industry in general?
Well, the airline industry in general has quite a bit of personally identifiable information when you think about what you have to go through to get on a plane these days. Everything from your whole name, your date of birth, your address, your phone number, your flight itinerary is going to go in there. There's a lot of information that you'd rather not have out there in the public, and the airlines have to protect that. In fact, there have been a couple of data breaches over the last couple of years involving major airlines, involving things like the frequent flyer programs. And so we have to look carefully at how we interact with our customers and make sure that data is incredibly safe. We just don't want to take the brand hit that would occur if data leaked out.
Sure. Now, at the same time, we're enjoying much better benefits by attaching more data to transactions to process. We're able to cross organizational boundaries. And so the user experience benefits of having more data are huge. We don't want to back off from that, but we do want to be able to make sure that that data is protected. What are some of the major trends in recognizing the need for better data, but rather at the same time protected? Can they be balanced well?
Well, the airline industry is moving forward on a lot of technology fronts. Some airlines, for example, are using mobile devices to welcome specific customers on board with a complete history of how good a customer they are to that particular airline so they can provide additional service in the air. Other airlines are using beaconing technologies, which I think is kind of cool. If you've got a mobile app on your phone for the airline and you're transiting through the airport, how cool is it to know where you are and how long it is it's taking you to get through security so that the airline might adapt at the gate as to whether there are going to be problems or not in boarding that particular plane. So there's a lot of different data points that are being collected now and used, different airlines handling them in different ways. In any event, the need for privacy is important, especially when you get over into the European Union, which has incredibly tight data privacy protection laws.
Sure, yeah. We've talked about that on this podcast series. Now, the answer then isn't sort of the old thinking around security where we'll just wall it off, we'll use as little data as possible. We need to have more data in more places, even down to that very mobile edge. So as we think about ways to accommodate our need for more data in more places, even everywhere, is there a top-level thinking that goes along or a shift in thinking about being able to make the data private but also usable?
Gosh, that's the balancing point. Everybody wants their data everywhere, and the ability to be, I guess you would call it data-centric, to move the protection of the particular data from that tight little confined hardened shell you used to have, a perimeter with a firewall and things like that, out to the edge where the data is actually being consumed is what has to happen these days. I mean, we're putting, again, some airlines putting personal information on the consumer right in the hands of the flight attendant on the plane. And Allegiant, for example, we're using mobile devices to accept credit cards on the plane. We're experimenting with a number of different technologies that fall into kind of the category of Internet of Things when you think about them. But what they all have in common is that they're outside any possible perimeter. So you have to find a way to make every device have its own individual perimeter, harden the data, harden the device, or some combination of the two.
Well, great. Let's hear a bit more about your particular airline. Tell us about Allegiant Air and what makes it unique in the airline industry.
Well, Allegiant's, I guess we're up to 53 or 54 consecutive quarters of profit, which is unheard of in the airline industry, which I think the famous phrase about the airline industry is, how do you become a millionaire? You start with $1 billion and you buy an airline. And so the profitability of airlines has been much in the news over the last decade, actually a couple of decades, because it's cyclical, where airlines fail, go into bankruptcy, or consolidate. And there's been a lot of consolidation in the United States, with United taking on Continental and Delta taking on Northwest as examples, Southwest taking on AirTran. Everybody's been in the game. Allegiant is kind of off on its own. We've found a particular interesting little niche that has very little direct competition on the routes that we serve, and that is taking vacationers to their favorite vacation destinations. So we connect small and medium-sized markets, a market like Kalispell, Montana, or Indianapolis, Indiana, meaning a medium-sized city, and we'll send them to Florida, send them to Las Vegas, send them to Los Angeles. We've got about 19 vacation destinations now, but we've got about 115 cities overall. In fact, we serve more cities than Southwest, if you want to get a comparison on the size of the route map. And we're also taking charter operators to 3 different countries in the Caribbean. So we've got quite the footprint. It adds up to about $1.3 billion in revenue a year. And as I say, it's been from profitability standpoint, it's regularly recognized as one of the most profitable airlines in the world.
Now, it sounds like most of your passengers, perhaps even all of them, are vacationers, not business travelers. Does that change anything when it comes to user experience and privacy and data?
It doesn't change anything as far as the need to protect the data, but what it does do is it puts a greater risk of brand problems concerning data breaches. When you consider the fact that our average customer flies with us once or twice a year, they're in many cases flying Allegiant in exchange rather than driving to their vacation destination. Or maybe they're taking a vacation they wouldn't have otherwise because of Allegiant's low prices. So what you have is not frequent travelers. In fact, that would be kind of the name. If we were going to have a frequent flyer program, it'd be the not frequent flyer program, because people just don't fly us frequently. And with that comes a level of I guess we might consider travel maturity, where people are going to be, well, I'm a business traveler. So-and-so had a breach, but everybody has breaches. I'm going to continue to fly them because I have marvelous status with their frequent flyer program. A Allegiant customer says, gee, I'm a little concerned about that if they were to have a data breach. I think I'll drive. So the brand damage from a breach, I believe, if you look at the amount of damage that could occur, is higher for our airline than some of the other airlines out there.
Right. All right. So given how important it is to your business, to your brand, how do you rationalize these approaches to security to the larger organization? I know that's probably not as prominent a problem as it used to be, because we can see directly the business implications of security issues. But is there a cultural message that you need to bring beyond the IT organization, that is to say, make security everybody's responsibility? And is that something that you've been trying to do?
Well, first, we're very lucky at Allegiant to have incredibly broad support from the C-level and the board of directors of our security program. And that's not a benefit that every company has, but we do, and it certainly makes life easier in developing the procedures and processes and technologies that are necessary to protect our customers' data. We came into the business here at Allegiant with the idea that we have the typical triad of people, process, and technology to deal with in the information security program. And if you want to look at that people, process, and technology as kind of 3 legs on a stool, if you miss one of those, you're going to be on your butt on the ground because the stool isn't going to work very well. So while we focused on technology and process early on, because those were the easy things, those were the low-hanging fruit, we've really moved into more of a stage of people now. We're much more into, and in fact, a significant amount of our budgetary spend is on security awareness for our people. So we've really had to look at how we best introduce security awareness to the entire company and to make the company more culturally sensitive to information security and the problems that could occur should we suffer a data breach, as an example. And that extends from the customer service agent who's checking you in at the ticket counter all the way up to the board of directors. The SEC has certainly chimed in and made our board more aware of problems concerning information security. Recently, Senator Markey has introduced legislation that specifically targets cybersecurity in the United States domestic airline industry. And down at the edge, of course, we've got the customer service agents who may be taking a credit card, so we've got PCI watching over things. So that need to protect the data has to recognize that the most important part of protecting the data is the people that are handling the data, and so awareness is really a big part of our program now.
Yeah, no, I'm finding that in more organizations, the people are so important on the security issues. But you mentioned PCI. Let's go back to that. How did that form a trigger? And I think that's not just for your organization, but for many organizations. PCI compliance sort of was a pivot point. What did that journey change mean for you? And maybe you could explain how you've gone about it, both process, people, and technology.
Well, first, I guess I have to say God bless compliance, because I think I got my first information security job thanks to an auditor telling someone that they needed an InfoSec guy because of SOX, and I joined Allegiant because of PCI. So it's certainly done wonders for the job market in information security, these various compliance regulations. Can only imagine what it's like with the Data Security and the European Privacy Act, the Data Privacy Act. But in regards to our travel into the world of PCI, Allegiant is also a unique airline in that we have the software that runs the airline, the applications that run the airline, are proprietary. We actually write that ourselves. We have a large development staff, and every aspect of the operation of the airline is run by custom software that we control and we write. A lot of benefits to that because it allows us to be very agile and flexible if we want to make changes. But the downside of that is it dates back. Some of the code dates back to the green screen days of the 1990s, and that code was going to be very difficult to bring into compliance from a PCI standpoint. It just was not written with security in mind. And while it wasn't directly handling credit card data, it was in the process flow path for credit card data. So it was in scope. So that was our biggest concern, was how we were going to ever bring a significantly non-compliant custom app that would take a great number of application developer hours to begin to bring up the snuff and still meet a relatively tight schedule for becoming PCI compliant. And so at the time we looked at a number of different products out there, and we thought, well, we can't solve every problem right now, so let's bite off small chunks and we'll take care of that. And the first thing that looked like it would be fairly easy to do, or at least straightforward from a technology standpoint, was tokenization. And so our search was, how can we tokenize the cards that we are storing? And that led us to stateless tokenization. We compared a number of different products, but we looked at the HPE stateless tokenization, and that was ultimately our choice for tokenization. Interestingly enough, while we were on our search for what the best tokenization product was, I happened to read a press release on a website that talked about format-preserving encryption and as a new technology that was going to become available, and that actually became HPE Secure Data Web. We found that by accident. It wasn't even a product that was available at the time, and at the time it was going to be targeted at card acquirers and the folks that were dealing with the Chase Payment Techs of the world and the Heartlands. And we actually had a hard time convincing the sales folks to consider selling it to us as a kind of a different type of end user. So that solved our application problem because it allowed us to encrypt the data that was passing through those legacy apps. But between the tokenization and the format-preserving encryption Secure Data Web, we were able to dramatically reduce the overall scope of PCI, and that's finally what led us to become compliant.
Now, this sounds like with custom apps, something that could take months, even quarters. How much time did this take you, and how important was that to you?
Well, the time to implement any application that is outside of what we develop ourselves is always a concern, because that takes our developers, who now have to serve as integrators, off of projects that might lead to higher revenues for the airline, or solve a problem, or offer a feature that the airline would like to do. And we're obviously very focused on improving the overall business, and so becoming compliant with PCI and having to spend a great deal of time to, for example, bring that legacy application into PCI compliance was not very appetizing. We found that the overall implementation of the HP products were very efficient. In fact, I think we had 1.5 full-time FTE equivalent application developers on the project, and it took them about 3 months. And that was integrating with multiple payment card interfaces, where we different ways we accepted credit cards, plus the tokenization. And I think we started at the end of October, and we went live at the end of January. So it was pretty lightweight from the standpoint of integrating a significant product into our ecosystem.
Right. Now, the secure stateless tokenization can often take organizations like yours out of the business of storing credit card information at all, that you're basically passing through and using various technologies to avoid being in a position where you could be a privacy problem. Was that the case with you all, and did you perhaps extend that to other types of data?
That was one of the marvelous parts of bringing the system online, is it did take us from storing many millions of credit card numbers down to absolutely zero. We store no payment card numbers at this time. Everything is tokenized. Card comes into our internal payment processing system, gets sent off to the card acquirer to determine whether it should be approved or denied, and it's immediately tokenized. So that has been a real win for the company, just much less to worry about from a card standpoint. Now, from the standpoint of how we can encrypt or rather protect other data, we're looking at a number of possible scenarios now that we've gotten past the PCI hurdle. For example, while we don't fly internationally with scheduled service, we do handle the charters for other companies. At some point, the company may well fly to international locations, and we'll be collecting passport numbers. So that would be the kind of thing we would also look at, in effect, using some type of format preserving encryption, so that we're not actually storing the actual data. That's going to be we've gained a lot of experience with the product over the last 3 years, and that's, I think, going to be a fairly easy implementation that will offer a great deal of protection. But we can also extend that out to customer names and birth dates and all kinds of different things, and we're looking at that now.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned encryption. The secure data web and the page integrated encryption is being used by a lot of folks for the web page, of course, the browser-based apps, but that also can provide a secure way to go to mobile. Many people are interested in the mobile web, not necessarily just native apps. Is that something you've been able to use as well, the secure data web as a way to get to the mobile edge securely?
We do use secure data web in our mobile application. We've been using it since we initially integrated the product several years ago. In fact, that was one of the data points that we had to protect from day one. So we have the app going out to the internet, grabbing the one-time encryption key, and encrypting that data in the application itself on the mobile device, on the Android device or the Apple device, and then sending that encrypted data back to our payment processing system, passing through any systems in the middle that as an encrypted form. One of the things that we have is we have a subsidiary that is not directly airline related, that is also developing a payment processing app for the business business space it works within, and they're actually, because they're developing a true native application for iOS, are going to be developing with the Secure Data Web SDK that's been released for mobile devices, which will certainly be much easier for them.
Well, cool. We hear, Chris, a lot of times that security is a cost center, that people don't necessarily see it as a way of bolstering business value or growing revenue streams. But it sounds like when you can employ some of these technologies, create a better posture, it frees you up. It makes you able to innovate and transform. Has that been the case with you? Can you point to any ways in which you've actually been able to increase revenue? I know for airlines it's a fairly tight margin on the travel, but some of those ancillary services can be a make or break. Is that the case here?
Well, Allegiant is a leader in what we call unbundled travel. We'd rather sell you exactly what you wanted and nothing more. When an airline says that they offer free bags, for example, they're not offering you free bags. It does cost to put those bags in the hold, put those bags in the overhead, and carry those bags on the plane with you. I mean, there's weight, and then that costs fuel. So there is an expense associated with every aspect of your travel on an airline today. That's just the way it is. Allegiant's unbundled our pricing so that we can say to a traveler, well, sure, if you want to get on the plane and you want to bring something and put under the seat, we'll sell you a seat on the plane. If you want to bring 40 pounds of baggage to put in the hold, we'll charge for that, because not everybody wants to bring a 40-pound bag to put in the hold. The thing about Allegiant with its proprietary application that runs the airline is that if we see an opportunity to offer a new service to the customer or a new ancillary service to the customer, we don't have to go to a third party and say, would you please add this so we can offer this feature to the customer? We can just do it. And at the time, we were worrying about PCI compliance and how we were going to accomplish PCI compliance. We also had a project to begin charging for carry-on bags, the bags that go up in the overhead. And we could either spend a lot of time retrofitting the legacy app for PCI, or we could spend time generating revenue by offering this new feature to the customer that they'd be charged for carry-on bags up in the overhead. In our case, we have to look at airline as a very the seats on a plane, everything associated with the airline have a very quick expiration date. When the plane takes off, an empty seat has no value, and it will have no value ever again. When a seat takes off empty, we can't sell that person a Coke. We can't sell them a bag. We can't sell them a car. We can't sell them a hotel room. That's gone forever. So speed to market is incredibly important for the airline industry, and it's maybe more important for Allegiant. In the case of our travails of PCI and how we were going to solve our PCI compliance issue, we wanted to be able to add this feature to charge for carry-on bags. So now you have a choice. Do you have spend a lot of time integrating and cleaning up legacy apps for PCI? Do you move ahead with something that could bring in millions of dollars in revenue? The answer, of course, is, well, you have to be compliant with PCI. So we have to do that first. The fact that we were able to implement the necessary controls with the HPE products in about 3 months with about 1.5 FTEs meant that other application developers could spend time on that carry-on bag feature in our software, allowing us to go to market with that sooner than we would have otherwise. Now, if you look at the fact that we went, say, to market 3 months earlier than we would have normally, if we'd spent 3 months of stopping everything to do nothing but PCI compliance, and instead we were able to use that time to develop carry-on bag charging, that is millions of dollars that would never have been captured in any other way, because it expires. It's gone. Once the plane leaves the ground, you can't charge anymore. So there was a real delivery to the bottom line as far as a profitable feature was concerned by being able to roll out that carry-on bags feature sooner, because we had a much easier, quicker, and lower resource from a resource intensity standpoint ability to integrate the HPE security products.
So going back to our opening sentiment around the fact that you can't just wall off data, the more data, the better for your business, and the more places that data can get, the better. You've demonstrated that that's also core to a business innovation, growing revenue in new ways, and being agile and adaptive to very competitive markets. That's a very interesting example. Okay, before we sign off, Chris, where do you go next? How, in other ways, do you think your security blocking and tackling has now enabled you to be more fleet, more agile, and perhaps find other business benefits?
Well, there is no substitute for delivering innovative solutions to problems that are well known throughout the business, and helping that to build your credibility with the C-level and the board of directors. And certainly the solution to our PCI compliance issues, which did get a lot of exposure to the C-level and the board level, being able to solve that quickly and without an impact to the operations of the airline, brought information security, I think, to a level that had not previously enjoyed at the airline. Although if you talk to our C-level folks on our board, they're going to tell you information, security is very important, and they believe that. The fact that you can demonstrate that you can deliver solutions that don't break the bank and do what they say they do means a lot. However, technology, again, going back to that three-legged stool, technology and the HPE security products that we implemented for PCI, just one part. If the folks aren't handling the credit cards properly, for example, physically on the end, if they're not adequately protecting the data that they have on their mobile devices out in the field, our risk is just as great as a credit card data breach would have been before we had implemented the tokenization. These are all things we've got to worry about.
Okay, well, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. We've been discussing how vacation specialty airline Allegiant Air solved their PCI problem and got a whole lot better security and business culture as well. And we've seen how security technology can lead to a better posture maturity and then ultimately to cultural transformation and many added business benefits. So thank me for joining our guest. We've been here with Chris Gullett, the Director of Information Assurance at Allegiant Air in Las Vegas. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks, Dana. Appreciate it and enjoyed the time with you today.
Great. And I'd also like to thank our audience as well for joining us for this Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Voice of the Customer Security Transformation discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this ongoing series of HPE-sponsored discussions. Thanks again for listening, and do come back next time.